Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Lisa here with my co-host Chris. We are with Wisdom from the Edge. We're so happy that you're joining us today. And today we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but we're going to circle it all back to an amazing universal law called the law of cause and effect. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Lisa. So excited to talk about this amazing principle and really dive into it. And hello to all you beautiful viewers, listeners. Welcome to another episode. It's going to be fun today.
Absolutely. So I wanted to get real and talk about how things have been going with you over the last couple of weeks. I just wanted to share a story with everyone that I don't know what has been happening outside of having some massive solar flares that could cause a lot of change and shifts within our physical form, within our mental and emotional bodies, where we may be feeling stuck or tired or really strange things that are happening. But I have really just come out of a pretty significant dark night of the soul. And I have to tell you, I thought I was kind of done with those. I thought, yeah, I've gone through it and I think that I've cleared up all my you know what to not have another one hit me like a brick. And yet, in the last several days, when I have heard from friends that I haven't heard from or talked to in a month or two or whatever, they literally have said to me, I feel like I've gone through the dark night of the soul. So I thought it was interesting to bring this to the forefront and just talk about it because what does it mean to have a dark night of the soul? And um, for me, it felt very much like on multiple levels of my body, of my physical form, I was going through some significant physical challenges where I was having migraines on a daily basis, which never happens to me. I was having this unbelievable neck and back pain that wouldn't go away, which then caused, it was the tipping point for the migraines to come in. I was having some kind of purging happening, some kind of detox or stomach flu or something. And then I had some weird rash that came. I mean, so on a physical side, I'm like, what is going on here? And on the mental, emotional side, I felt I had moments where I could hardly get out of bed. And Chris, I mean, like, I don't know how you've been feeling, but I mean, I'm like, what? This isn't mine, is it? I don't think this is mine. Am I so open in all of my chakra points that I can't close my own auric field? Is this part of the collective soup that we're in? Am I feeling other people's deep, deep pain and suffering? Or is this my own that's kind of coming up and out of my own body? So it's just been a really tremendous um, process over the last couple of weeks. What have you experienced?
Oddly similar. So we're recording this for those of you listening and watching. We're recording this on I think the September 26th of 2023. Um, and honestly, these days it's like I have to even remember what year we're in. I feel like a time traveler half the time. I'm like, what era is this? What reality am I in? And that was also part of the feeling of this whole month was is also feeling a little out of place with time and space. That's personally how I've been feeling, and not in a negative or positive way, just more of a neutral sense. However, at the very end of August, I came down with some. I'm not even going to say it's an illness because I know it wasn't. It was definitely an energetic detox. And if, for those who are like, "What the heck is an energetic detox?" I define that by our physical outer world is a representation of what's going on in our inner world. At least that's my belief, and that seems to be what I've, that's my current understanding, as I like to say. I don't pretend to know anymore what is what, but my current understanding is that what we feel inside manifests outside of us. And so this illness, quote unquote, that I got that knocked me out for almost 2 weeks, um, was really an energetic detox because there was so much purging. I had similar symptoms as to you, Lisa, headache, nausea, extreme aches and pains, just physical. Like I could not get comfortable. It was very, very uncomfortable feeling, fever, just all the stuff that you kind of just throw it all in, you know, and, and just, it just knocked me out for the first 2 weeks of September. And that already was just my, I guess, dark night of the soul, because it forced me to rest. It forced me to do nothing, literally nothing. I couldn't do work, anything that was quote unquote productive. Couldn't do that. Couldn't even think about my own career. I couldn't do anything in that time that I had off other than rest. And that's obviously in of itself a great lesson, because I was learning in those moments that I still put a lot of my self-worth attached to what I'm accomplishing in my life. And it was just a new layer of understanding how much of that self-respect and that self-worth and self-love I still put towards what I've accomplished. And so part of my dark night of the soul this last month was many, many epiphanies. And one of them I'll share is that, well, we have a lot of what's the one I want to share first. The first one, I guess, that's on the top of my mind is that we have a lot of these dark nights of the soul, these inner moments of time where we have to go inward, we have to take a step back, and we have to rest, and we have to heal, and we have to really listen and feel these emotions that are very challenging. They're never easy. And I feel like we're always going to still have cycles of that throughout our whole life, because that we live in a cyclical reality. However, that version of that dark night of the soul can look different as time goes on and as it evolves and as we evolve. So it doesn't have to be this like sidelines you for a whole month. Maybe the next time it sidelines you in a more gentle way and for less long of a period of time, maybe, or something like that. So I also recognize and surrender to the fact I'm like, hey, you know what? These moments that kind of sideline me, and they've happened before, I'm at peace with that. So I really also, I kind of welcomed this dark night of the soul. I think I embraced it
Mm.
more than I've ever embraced a previous dark night of the soul. And that
Can
also,
I just stop you for a second? Because I
please.
wanted to just say what was really awesome about what you said is that you were able to measure where you were in the duration and the intensity and the frequency of that dark night of the soul compared to another time, right? So I just wanted to say that because this is a great way, viewer listener, to we're still going to go through those, but can you be cognizant, conscious enough, aware enough to say, okay, this really sucks. However, I think it sucked way more 5 years ago or 3 years ago or whenever that was. So I just wanted to say that, Chris, because that
No,
was that was pretty cool.
it's so true, and it's the same. Like we can always have those. We've talked about this in another episode, at least once, where you have these measurement. These what do you call them? Litmus tests. And each time we go through this dark night of the soul, we have a litmus test. I mean, it brought me back to probably my darkest quote unquote night of the soul, which actually in my early 20s lasted 2 years. Like I went through a 2 year dark night of the soul, really, if I look back at it. And now it's like, oh, it took me a month, or actually like 2.5 weeks to get through this last one. So right there, that's a huge improvement. And if it were to take me longer, that's okay too. That's another thing, is that I'm just really letting go of these exterior. Oh God, just the way we quantify everything and have to categorize everything into something of good or bad, and I'm just so sick of that labeling program that we have of like, well, this is clearly a good situation and this is clearly bad. I'm like, well, what if it just is, and we have no idea if it's good or bad yet, or ever will. And one of the last things I'll share is that I really learned in this most recent Dark Night of the Soul to truly let go of needing these exterior material achievements to validate my existence, basically. And that sounds really dramatic, but that is kind of how it was breaking down to me, even in, my most recent state of being in a pretty good place of self-love and self-awareness and all that stuff. Again, there's always layers. And this layer for me was really to, um, when I was in that rest mode, I was like, okay, the only way this is ever going to really truly help me and heal me is if I can let go of the stress and the pressure for me to continue to be productive, for me to continue to have this master plan that I'm working towards, where I'm ultimately bringing in all this abundance. And I'm doing to form some form of a material life that is still valid and beautiful. And we should all, there's nothing wrong with wanting to have nice things and achieve beautiful goals and all that. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the only reason we're here. And it's definitely not the way to validate your existence. And I know that's how a lot of us, and I know certainly for me, it certainly has been how I validated, my existence, whether it's accomplishing things in your career, making money, or doing things that just look and sound really great for people and therefore make me feel better about my quote unquote achievements. So I had to let go of all that. I had to dissolve all of that. And when I did, it allowed for a lot of room and a lot of space. And of course, then the downloads come in, the ideas come in, the inspiration comes in for how you can kind of start striving a new path, in a sense that isn't maybe throwing the full baby out with the bathwater, but is approaching things just a little bit differently. And that's that tweak that I'm now reapproaching my career and taking all the pressure off of it as much as I can, and just trying to come at it with this new angle right now. I wouldn't have found that new angle if I didn't have that dark night of the soul and that down time,
Mhm.
emotionally and physically, to really come to those solutions. So even now, I look back at that dark night of the soul very fondly, actually, and with a smile on my face and with gratitude, because it's actually really helping with my current direction. And as always, these situations are never good or bad. They're just what we need in that moment. And now I'm kind of reaping some of the benefits of this most recent dark night of the soul.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Um, there's a number of things that I want to say here, and one of them is that we unlearn what we have been programmed to learn, especially in the Western world, of we are worth only a certain amount based on our material comforts, based on where other people feel that we should be positioned at a certain time in our lives. And I think it's a bunch of BS. And the other thing I'm going to say is that Chris, you were under the weather, quote unquote, and it had nothing to do with COVID, right? So, people can look at this and say, oh, well, he had COVID, so that he sounds like, no, 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 no. There's nothing to do with it. We actually, if you can believe this, we can actually have the physical manifestation of a dis-ease of some kind and not have COVID, by the way. And we can actually have that be the last piece of the transformation or the recalibration that we as a soul in physical form are going through in the next iteration of our own transformation, of our own evolution, where we are in the moment, right?
Yeah, and you only need to look into like the work of, just as one example of many, of, like Dolores Cannon, and just read her testimonials and any of her teachers for that matter. And you just see how people with terminal cancer or a massive tumor in their body go and they get this quantum regressive hypnosis technique that she has, and you're basically just hypnotized. I've had it done once. You're hypnotized, and you talk about it, you go through it, you go through the process, and then a lot of the times, just after one session or a couple sessions, these people come out and they have no cancer anymore because of a past life where something happened that caused something, whatever, whatever, whatever. There's a million different variations on how that could happen, but the fact is it's like this whole concept of, we still can't even prove the concept of a past life yet, here this technique lies with the fact that our soul is infinite, has had many lifetimes. It works with that idea, and all you can say at the end of it, it's kind of like acupuncture, where Western medicine has no choice but to acknowledge that something's happening, something clearly is working, and we just don't understand how. It's, with acupuncture, we don't understand the meridians still, energy meridians, and with this, this technique of Dolores Cannon, we don't understand how our consciousness can have all this memory and bring it into your current life, and that will manifest into something physical
Well, that's actually talking about parallel universes.
or parallel
And
universes. Sure.
so after I studied Chinese medicine in the early 2000s, I was like, okay. And I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, Chris, but I studied, and there was one particular professor who was a Qigong master. And I will never forget him because he changed the way in which I saw Chinese medicine as a whole. And I am a huge fan of Chinese medicine. I think it's an amazing art. I think it's an amazing way in which to heal. It actually helps in understanding the way the body is in its long term illnesses, right? In the way in which the body gets into a dis-ease versus an acute illness like a stroke is acute. But even, heart attacks are not, because it's a heartache over a long period of time. Diabetes, you think about all these are, even cancer, typically is very long term. Well, when I studied with this particular Qigong master, um, I remember as a group, we would be amazed because he never used needles. As a matter of fact, he was always in another room doing work on us as students, and we would actually feel the needles, but he was in another room completely. Pretty wild. And so, I remember asking him, I'm like, why don't you use needles? What is happening? And he would use a pendulum instead. So he would go through the body and he would heal through his pendulum. And I'm so grateful that I actually have one of his pendulums he gave me as a gift. And he said, the needle is a placebo. He said, the needle and acupuncture actually works when the intention of the practitioner and the intention of the patient actually are in coexistence and align. He said, but you don't have to have that in order to heal. So I literally was like, why am I studying to be a doctor right now? I'm like dying, learning, 2,500 points, learning herbology, learning an entire language. I'm like, okay, let me get to the quickest way. So fast forward, and I decided to study with another very bizarre. I mean, this guy was, and he's still, anyway, it's called matrix energetics. Matrix energetics is a consciousness technology that helps understand how to instantaneously heal all aspects of the body. So I'm going this far to go to now say that one of the ways that we were taught is, as a practitioner, is to even look at the carpet and say, oh, I see a new pattern. Patient, walk to that, or client, walk to that particular place in the carpet and feel something different. It's all about imagination. And healing is done. And that's why people go into remission, is because there's not only a belief system that the practitioner has, but also that the patient has. And that they are able to, whether it's past life regression or it's saying, let's just move you in a different parallel universe. Let's move you in a new quantum entanglement that is different than your current directive of where you are in your 3 dimension. Let's move you in the 5th dimension. Then we'll move you back to a 3rd dimension in a different waveform. Okay. That all of a sudden changes the way someone can look. They can literally go through even a remission of, they can't walk or they have a pain, and you touch that pain and you go through and say, hey, that memory is gone. All of a sudden the pain is gone. So there's so much that Western medicine is just taking baby steps, I still think, in the way in which we can heal, right?
Yeah, it's more still, for acute situations versus pretty much anything else. And it's also interesting. If anyone watching or listening is curious to see really quick, tangible evidence of what we're talking about, just YouTube Greg Braden tumor chant, something like that, and it should come up like this very classic video, probably from at least 2 decades ago now, of Greg Braden being interviewed, telling about this um, place in China, and there's many like it, where it's just traditional Chinese medicine, but it's
Mm-hmm,
called a no medicine hospital, I believe,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and or non-medicine hospital, and it's obviously what it sounds like. There's no medicine. This is the opposite of the pharmaceutical Western complex that we have, and basically the whole premise is that the woman in this video is has a tumor, but she believes in the process of these monks, and then the monks are standing around her chanting a chant that they've agreed upon ahead of time, and essentially it's present tense of it is gone, something to that is, something to that degree, meaning the tumor. And they chant this, and you can watch on an ultrasound in real time, this tumor gets smaller and smaller and smaller in a matter of minutes, and then it's gone. So if you want the physical, tangible evidence, that's a great example of what we're talking about. And it's very, very real. And so many people have had life changing experiences overnight from some of
Right.
these modalities. But the big stipulation is there has to be a belief from the person receiving, and of course giving it, but that's, I guess, probably a bit more, you would assume that's the case, that they would believe it, but certainly from the patient, you have to believe in it. Maybe not fully 100,000%, but there's got to be a strong belief for sure. And that comes down
Yeah.
then to everything in life is basically your perception and your belief.
So this actually brings us full circle, Chris, to the universal law of cause and effect. So where did these universal laws come from? And I am going to actually read something really quick, and then Chris is going to do a little show and tell because we're going to go deep into the ancient past. But essentially, the principles of the universe, which, by the way, are the only things that are constant in a world that is not constant except for change. But these universal principles are absolutely, they don't change. And we see them as we will continue talking about. The one in particular is the principle of cause and effect. So, where did these principles actually come from? Well, they are hermetic principles and it was written in a book called the Kabbalion, and not to get that mixed up with the Kabbalah. The Kabbalion is a book that was written by the three initiatives back in 1906 by the Yoga Publication Society in Chicago. And the Kabbalion actually talks about these very important 7 principles, which were written by Hermes Trismegistus. Now, Hermes Trismegistus actually stands for thrice great Hermes. And and Hermes was this legend. Well, I don't call him legendary, right? But it was a semi-god or a semi-divine figure who is said to have brought learning to Egypt in the remote past. Hermes Trismegistus is often identified as both the Greek god Hermes as well as the Egyptian god Thoth. And so, Chris, I want for you, so the 6th uh, principle of all of the 7 basic principles of the law of the universe is called the cause and effect, the principle of cause and effect. And we're going to dive into this. But before we do that, Chris, I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit about Thoth.
Yeah, Thoth is a really fascinating creature, person, being, whatever you want to call this character. He shows up a lot. These are, of course, just the initial, Google search images you'll find. Um, that, of course, this is a very iconic figure. I'm sure you all will recognize this figure of Thoth. Now, Thoth also almost always is depicted with the head of an ibis bird, and this is a and sometimes with these Egyptians, you got to really ask the question: is this literal, or this is metaphorical, or is it both? From what I've researched, the head here is metaphorical. I believe, when you really look into Thoth, and if you take it at face value that Thoth was a real person at some point, probably didn't have the head of an ibis bird. But now that we are, engraving this character in, and I'm starting with Thoth because Thoth and Hermes, for those watching and learning, are actually the same person. I'll get into that in a second. But the head of the ibis bird is very important because one of the main themes of this god Thoth is extracting knowledge and wisdom from the depths of the darkness. And Lisa, like, how perfect is that? We're talking about the dark night of the soul on this podcast today, and Thoth is like the god that is all about going into the dark to then bring out the light, going into the ground. So the metaphor of the ibis bird is you stick his head in the ground to bring the seeds and the nutrition from the soil up into the earth and into life, and to find the food and the nourishment inside the darkness and then bring it to the light. So Thoth really is the god of wisdom when it all comes down to it. And then, of course, later on, he becomes Hermes. And with these gods, without getting too much into this, because this is a huge big other story, other rabbit hole, these gods that we hear about all throughout history, there's a lot of evidence now, especially to support that these were actually real beings to some degree. You can't, take it all literally, but you also can't dismiss all of it either, because these gods clearly had a major influential role in our development, in our evolution. And that's also likely why this being known as Thoth could live for so long and become another person and rename himself as Hermes. So basically, I mean, the takeaways with this god is that he really taught the human race, it seems, about all the wisdom that we still carry to this day. He was an extremely important character that brought wisdom to the everyday people, and really tried to enlighten the everyday person to bring about a larger level of consciousness for all. And so he was remembered and thought after for that, but also because of the writings that he left behind. And one of the most famous writings he left behind was the Emerald Tablets. And the Emerald Tablets have been translated by many people throughout time, including famous scientist Newton, Mr. Newton. I'm forgetting his other, Sir Isaac Newton. There it is, his full name. So, we know Sir Isaac Newton because he invented Newtonian physics. He barely spent any time on Newtonian physics. What Sir Isaac Newton was far more interested in was the writings of this guy, Thoth, or as he was known then, was Hermes. And it's because of this writing that a lot of the principles we talk about on this podcast have now come into place, because this being, who likely was from another realm of reality, another dimension of reality, had abilities to prolong his life for very long periods of time. He talks about that in the Emerald Tablets. But he also shares these fundamental core pieces of wisdom that you said, Lisa, are universal. And I mean, this God character, real or not, clearly understood the universality of it, or the universal nature of it, if that's not a word, because look at it. This is thousands of years ago that this God, existed in ancient Egypt. And the thing is you can actually trace Thoth even further back from ancient Egypt to ancient Sumeria, because he was very likely the son of Enki, who was according to the Sumerian clay tablets, the creator of all of us, of the human race, and of all these hominid beings. But that's a whole other another story. But this God has been around a long, 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 long time, and has seemed to be the one who distills wisdom and knowledge for the people. And we got that to this day with our hermetic principles. So that's
So isn't Thoth um like was an Atlantean like priest king god that like I mean this was back like 36,000 years, right? BC, something like that.
yeah. If we want to get into the real nuts and bolts of it, I'll try to summarize the best I can. But basically, yes, Thoth the Atlantean likely came from the fallen civilization of Atlantis 12,500 years ago, roughly at the end of the last ice age. It seems very likely that he was a part of that more ancient civilization, was able to be part of the body of people that re-established civilization, that rebooted civilization. And Egypt certainly was one of the ground zero points of the Atlantean civilization. So it's a
Mhm.
depository of their leftover information. Library of Alexandria would be a great example of that. And
Isn't
supposedly
don't they call it the library or the halls of
the halls of
Ameti?
Amenti, the halls of
Amenti, yeah.
Amenti are actually underneath, supposedly underneath the Great Pyramid, and under the Great Sphinx. And Edgar Cayce even talks about that, where the Hall of Records is kept. I actually got to go into a secret pathway in the Great Sphinx, so that pathway does exist, FYI, into an underground city of some kind. But yeah, Atlantean god, very likely of a race of being very similar looking to us humans, but not human, therefore living way, 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 way longer, and yeah, had an advanced knowledge, an incredibly advanced knowledge that he distilled into more bite-sized pieces known as the Hermetic principles.
You know, it's really interesting. You know, you and I both love Marvel movies. And so there was a Marvel um, series that came out last year that was called the Moon Knight. Did you see that?
I actually didn't. No.
Okay, actually, it's pretty good. And they only had one. I think they're going to come up with another episode, but I liked it. I mean, there was some darkness to it, but I think Ethan Hawke was in there, which is pretty wild. He was kind of a not so good of a doctor played part in that. Um, so let's like dive in just for a few minutes about the principle of cause and effect, because I think Chris, you had said something at the very beginning of you know what we are going through, or just our experiences that we talked about earlier of this the dark night of the soul. Is it possible for us to actually, as humans, right? Or I will just say more clearly, souls within a physical form. And by the way, it's not just stuck within this physical form. We actually we actually are much bigger in our auric field. But is it possible for us as humans to accept the accountability that what we put in, we will receive that equal to what we put in? And that to me is what the law of cause and effect is. So, as an example, when we are not kind to someone, we are going to get not so kind back to us, whether it's with that same person or others. If we are not happy, we're going to be around people who are not happy. If we are thoughtful and kind and have a compassionate heart, we're actually going to receive that compassionate, loving kindness in return. And so, cause and effect is anything that we want to experience as the effect or the effect is solely based on what we put into it. And this is why it's so important to not just allow for things to unfold, right? As Chris, you were saying a little earlier, that you just surrendered. You weren't feeling well. You were purging. You were, your body was adjusting, and You decided to let go. You're not going to hold on to this old belief system or this, your lenses that had said in the past, well, if I'm not productive, I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or, the stories that we can tell ourselves. And you just surrendered to that. Is it possible? And I believe so, right? That the the way in which un you let go of the reins during this particular transition, right? When you were recalibrating, now there is an opening that has come in the forefront for you. The same thing for me, right? 2 weeks ago, I could hardly, I just was not feeling good. Mentally, emotionally, I felt like I was walking through tar, right? And viewer, listener, you may have be going through this now. You may be like, yeah, I totally felt that. But how can we then say, okay, what am I going to choose to to keep in my forefront, my thoughts and feelings of what I want the most out of life? And what is the magic that I want to experience in life? Because we're going to receive experiences based on the thoughts and feelings that we have. So our thoughts and our feelings are like little pebbles that we get to throw in the pond, and that pond is called life. And those ripples from throwing those little pebbles in the pond are our experiences. But what I want to clarify that though, because it doesn't mean that we can't have a breakthrough. And a lot of times our breakthroughs come from our breakdowns, right? So the importance of understanding that we have the ability to shift at any moment. And Chris, like you, like me, we just decided to surrender to, well, let's just see what happens. I'm not going to try to fight this, whatever it is that my physical body is feeling. I'm not going to try to fight whatever it is that I'm feeling mentally, emotionally. I'm just going to let myself ride it out and see what happens. What was do you want to talk a little bit about that from your experience?
Yeah, it was really it was a nice situation to really reframe for myself this pressure that I didn't even know I still put on myself to be doing anything in my life. And, I think it also just had my birthday. So there's a little bit of that, like, oh, I'm of a particular age where there's a particular story that we are fed throughout society of, oh, well, if for myself personally, at the age of 35, I should probably have, property and a family and blah, 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 whatever else a 35-year-old man is supposed to have. I don't even know anymore. But there are still those ideas. And I was feeling a bit of that, just that societal pressure more than anything, family societal kind of pressure. And among that, there's a lot of contributing factors. And I had to remind myself, one, that, okay, this whole situation that I was feeling and going through was happening for me, not to me. And to even add more variables into that situation, I had a trip to Egypt planned at that time too. That Lisa I know is very familiar with because we were chatting a lot during that period, and um, I wasn't able to go to Egypt too, so I had to let go of that whole thing that had been in the works for many months, and I even didn't I I technically lost money on that too, and all of that I still reframed with it was happening for me, and it's easy to look at the situation in a very nuts and bolts way and go, well, it's clearly not happening for you, Chris. You just lost money. This whole trip you tried to go on isn't now happening, or it is happening, but you can't go. And that would, on paper, look like a negative situation. However, I would keep reframing, well, if this is happening for me, what is the purpose of it, basically? Then why is it happening for me, not to me? And with that small little reframe of that question, it allowed me to be at more peace while I went into like, okay, so I'm totally knocked out, not able to travel, not able to do anything. All right, like the first couple days I had no idea and I just had to like really just rest. And then after maybe a week, the ideas slowly started to come in. This takes time, right? It's not like it doesn't always just happen super quickly. And then over time, with a lot of gentleness and a lot of love, self love, and a lot of like understanding towards myself, I had to give myself in order to feel these things. It started to slowly come in where, you know, one of the big takeaways was that it's totally fine to be wanting to plan out your life and to think of the things that you do want to bring in. That's great because that's actually how you bring them in, is to think about them and write them out, write them down and speak them out and to really bring them into reality. And at the exact same time, none of that stuff matters. None of it. And I was watching some of these near death experiences, a great YouTube channel called The Other Side. And on this channel, it's just all near death experiences, all NDEs. And I love watching them. I find them so fascinating and highly profound. And one of the ones I was watching, just the end of it left me really understanding that on the other side of our reality, on these other sides outside of the physical third dimensional reality, so many of the things that we stress about just dissolve because none of them matter. It's all a construct of our own minds. We've created all of this stress out of nothing. And that's
Mhm.
just part of our journey to kind of undo a lot of that programming, because when you really take a step back, you're like, I mean, it all matters and none of it matters all at the same time. It's a beautiful paradox. And it's like your day to day, if anything, now I'm just kind of like, I don't exactly really know where I'm going in life anymore. And that's okay. I'm really enjoying the journey. I'm making sure that whatever I'm doing now is just things that I'm passionate about and that I love. And then it's also building towards more of those things, to be able to build more of those things for myself in my life. And at the same time, it just doesn't matter, like wherever I go, as long as I'm, with people I love and I'm in connection and I'm loving myself and spreading, my vibration to other people. That's all that really matters, just be in joy and be in presence and just take in all the little bits. And now it's like I'm like sitting having a coffee in the morning with a big grin on my face, like a stupid grin, like the dumbest grin. And I mean that in the sense of like, I feel like I'm just stumbling upon like this hilarious secret of the universe, and it's funny because you're like, ha, you went through your whole life stressing about all this stuff and none of it matters. And then just kind of just wake up to that is quite refreshing. And it's funny. Like I literally sometimes now find myself giggling for no reason and I'm just
That's
sitting
so great.
in giggles.
So a lot of people may think of the principle of cause and effect, of like what we reap is what we sow. And I feel like that's coming from a real place of judgment. I mean, a lot of people would maybe look at it, maybe the Hindu philosophy will look at it as karma, right? And when we think of karma, we think of, oh, well, you're going to get bad karma if you're doing this, or you're not doing that, or whatever. But, I think that it completely reeks of judgment, or of some kind of cosmic justice, coming down, some kind of judgment. And but the reality is that every cause has an effect and every effect has a cause, and nothing happens for just no reason. There is no coincidences, right? It is that, and there are no accidents in the world, that we are, the effects that we create in our lives are the direct result of the causes that come from within each and every one of us, and that there is a reason for it. And, Chris and I were talking about the things that have happened to us over the last couple of weeks of this dark night of the soul. And why do we have to know why things have to happen to us? And this is, I kind of plague myself sometimes with like, well, I want to know why. I want to know why. I want to know why. And the thing is it doesn't have to be a why for it. No matter what, causation always turns into some kind of manifestation. But we get to direct the traffic of what it is that we want to see as a desirable outcome or desirable experience, based on the way in which we're thinking, the based on the words that we say, based on our emotions, based on the way that we're interacting with others, the way we're interacting with the world. If we're kind enough, I'll go so far as to say I don't like spiders at all. but I don't kill spiders. I capture them and I put them outside. And very few people understand that about me. But I know that I want to save life. I want to support life. I want to honor life. And I want that, whatever that creepy crawly thing that, you know, that I don't like to see, that is always being honored, because I know that that will come back to me. And there is a loop that happens. And I feel like we have the ability, through working in our own, I'm going to use the word self mastery, but we get to perfect this over our lifetime of, hey, you know what? That didn't go so well. That didn't feel really good. You know what? Let me try it again. Because every single moment of our entire lives, every single moment is magical because it's different. No matter what, even this podcast, no matter how many times we may talk about the same thing, it's different because we're different, because we've evolved and you have evolved. And so how can we take everything that we're doing in our lives and look at the beauty behind it, and how we can consciously choose what we want to experience in our lives? Because what else is there,
Yeah, we're
right?
we're here to learn. I mean, this whole existence, in my opinion, is Earth school. Like we came here just to learn, and we came here to learn everything. And everything comes in every different shape and size, and every way of navigating life is different. Therefore, all of the ways you can navigate your life are totally valid. In other words, what makes you quote unquote successful or a high achiever is completely relative to how you want to navigate and live your life. You can have the most fulfilling life with nothing, living as just as an example, like a monk in the mountains, or you could have everything like a billionaire, or you could be in the middle of that, or you could be every other expression, like just like an artist that has his or her living, totally paid for, but otherwise doesn't make. I'm just giving examples of like there's a million different ways that we can live in this world, and none of them are better or worse than one another. Living as a homeless person, as much suffering and as challenging as that would be for your whole life, versus someone who's a millionaire, after it's all said and done, their life versus the homeless person's life, they're the same. There's no better or worse. They lived a very specific type of life that taught them a whole variety of things that their soul and the consciousness can then take back after this life and ruminate on and digest and all of that good stuff. Because that's another thing I hear a lot when I watch these near-death experiences. And of course, through my research into ancient civilizations that understood this very well, but confirmed or reaffirmed by these amazing near death experiences that are recorded into the tens of thousands, is that there's a life review after this, and you do get to actually look at everything, every single moment, and learn from it. So we really are here just to live in whatever way we're meant to live, and that is completely individual and completely unique to where you are. And the last thing I'll say is, with all of this connection, it's like it's either all of it is connected or none of it is. Either all of it is for a purpose or none of it is, right? I don't think there's this in between. And so for myself personally, I personally, through my own personal life experience and for my research, it kind of has to fall and it's all connected, and it all makes sense in some maybe higher divine kind of way. And I'll just leave everyone here with a really interesting quote from Max Planck, he's the grandfather of quantum physics. And he always, I mean, quantum physics brushes up against consciousness every single time there's an experiment done, because it's inescapable. And so he said, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. So in other words, it all comes back to consciousness. That's why everything is connected, because everything is alive. So
And
we'll
I
leave it.
love that. And everything is the mind, right? Everything is the all, and we are the mind. And I appreciate the quote. And I'm going to leave also with a quote from Paramahansa Yogananda. And Paramahansa Yogananda said, the mind is the creator of everything. You should therefore guide it to create only good. If you cling to a certain thought with dynamic willpower, it finally assumes a tangible outward form. When you are able to employ your will always for constructive purposes, you become the controller of your destiny. And I would add to that, in the most positive, profound ways. So thank you so much, Chris. This is wonderful. You and I can sit here for the next 3 hours and continue talking about this.
Oh yeah.
But we'll put the stop and the pause button on right now. And viewer, listener, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. If you like what you're hearing and you like, where we're going with this, please feel free to give us some comments, give us some thumbs up, subscribe, and we will be back with you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Always a pleasure.
Okay.
And thank you so much, everyone, for checking out another episode of Wisdom from the Edge. We'll catch you next time. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Wisdom from the Edge. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. And make sure, if you haven't already, to follow, like, and subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate that. It actually helps us out quite a lot in growing this platform. And also leave us a comment if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you, hear your thoughts about what you enjoyed on this episode and things that you want to offer, maybe ideas for a new episode or things that you want to hear more about. Also, make sure to check out our website, wisdomfromtheedge.org. All that is in the description below. And you can learn more about what we do, what offerings we have, and of course, the courses and programs. There's lots to learn from, a lot of really cool resources to check out to enhance your everyday life. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Wisdom from the Edge.